Good morning to Nance Begum Hemaram Kisoon. I want to say special thank you to Akash Samaru for holding on while I got to studio this morning. This morning, as is customary, we will follow all of the major stories. And one of the big developments expected to happen today for Parliament, the opposition expected to present a motion to oppose the government's recommended changes to the selection process of the Commissioner of Police. And joining us on the telephone at this time, a member of the Police Service Commission, Martin George. Mr. George, good morning. How are you?
Yes, hi, good morning to you, Hema, and good morning to your viewers.
Now, my first question to you, Mr. George, was the Police Service Commission consulted before the recommendations were announced?
Well, Hema, I think we would have seen the statement by the chairman, which appeared in the media earlier this week, so I wouldn't want to comment other than to refer you to that.
Now, in terms of the consultation process itself and the recommendation. So the head or the chairman of the commission has indicated that they were not consulted. She also said that it was a little disrespectful, if I'm paraphrasing here what she had to say. As it relates to the recommendations and the substantial changes that have been put forward, looking at a local firm for the selection and also the use or ensuring that the criteria is just limited to locals. What do you make of the changes? Do you think that they are something, do you think that's a step in the right direction?
Well, the thing is, Hema, what I would say at the outset is that it's unfortunate that we are all supposed to be on the same page. We are all supposed to be working towards the same objective, which is to increase the safety and security of the nation. But it appears that for one reason or another, we were singing from different song sheets, in that you have the government on one side saying one thing, you have the opposition indicating that, look, they were not consulted, and they are saying that they are going to, be challenging this and opposing it. And I really think that it's the type of scenario where we ought to have sought some kind of consensuality going forward, because the importance of the position and the post of Commissioner of Police cannot be understated in this scenario. When one looks at the proposed changes, there appear to be some fundamental changes which are being put forth, and I think it's the type of change that ought to have been the subject, and I say this with the greatest of respect, it ought to have been the subject of maybe a more broad-based consultation and discussion with the major stakeholders and players in this scenario. Because what you're doing, you're changing the requirements in terms of, first of all, stating that the candidate must be a national of Trinidad and Tobago. And then when you look at the educational requirements, you've set that there. But the point is, you also have a scenario where previously you allowed for an officer who had worked his way up through the ranks, who may not have met the strict requirement of having a university degree. And if he had 20 years experience in a senior capacity in the police service, he would have been eligible. Now that has been removed. You also have a scenario where instead of 12 years as your minimum experience to qualify you as a candidate for the office of Deputy Commissioner, that has now been changed to 10 years. And then you also have the scenario where even the process for the selection, it has changed, I think, maybe in a significant way. At least it is proposed to be changed in a significant way, in that it appears that what you have now in the new proposed, legislation would be that the selection process is one which would now be initiated by the Minister of National Security, where it says the Commission, on request of the Minister of National Security, shall, in accordance with Section 20A1C of the Central Tenders Board Act, contract an appropriate local firm. So the point is, you have the process being initiated, first of all, by the Minister of National Security, and then what you have apart from that is that there were several safeguards whereby previously there was provision for the commission to be consulted at every stage of the process by the firm, that they ought to have, come back to the firm, come back to the commission with their findings, and then, the commission had a more significant role, it would appear. And in the new proposed legislation, it respectfully does not appear that way on the face of it, but of course we'd have to hear what the politicians and parliamentarians have to say when the debate ensues.
When the changes were first made for the empowered role of the Police Service Commission, it was all with the intention of taking out or insulating the process from political interference. Do you think that the proposed changes will now yield itself to a greater possibility of political interference?
Well, unfortunately, I would say, Hema, when one looks at the purpose of the statutory bodies, the Teaching Service Commission, the Police Service Commission, the Public Service Commission, the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, these bodies are really there for that purpose of insulating, their jurisdictions from the interference by politicians. And I think anything that, in a sense, whittles away at the power of any of these statutory commissions, because remember, these are commissions appointed by the president. So you are not politically appointed. You don't change members of this commission when governments change. You are supposed to be above the fray at all times. So therefore, in those circumstances, one must always zealously, and I would say in some cases jealously, guard the independence of these institutions and the role that they are supposed to play. So while it is that I think we all want to see changes made in that you want to see the process become more transparent and more efficient, and you want to expedite the process for the appointment, I think we have to do it in such a manner that it does not infringe on the constitutional authority of any of these statutory bodies, and in this case, the Police Service Commission.
And on the surface, do you think that that's what it's doing, the recommended changes, taking away the power of the commission and making the process more political?
Well, I wouldn't say that it makes it more political, but the point is, if there is in any way a reduction or a whittling down of the power, authority, or influence of the commission in the overall process, then I think certainly you are opening yourself up to gaps and cracks where there can be possible areas of influence coming in. And I think as much as possible as a nation in Trinidad and Tobago, we ought to avoid that, because I think we can look back and we have a rich history of our statutory bodies serving this role as the vanguard of the interest of the citizens, and we need to ensure that that is preserved. It's not a question of, turf or, trying to protect your territory. It's simply a question of looking after the interest of the nation above the political fray. Because I think once we descend to the level of the, antagonistic politics, then we were not going to get anywhere in terms of resolving this issue.
We all agree, Mr. George, that the process does need to be changed, that it's extremely convoluted, and while the intentions were laudable, there needs to be some change. If you had to make two recommendations, one which would find the balance of independence but expedite the process, what would the recommendations be?
The first thing I would say, Hema, is that I think there's definitely a need for permanent members of the PSC, which would then allow you to put an even greater responsibility on them in terms of managing the entire selection process. Because as it stands, because you have part-time members, and it's purely, persons, having to manage their time, it's difficult in all the circumstances to say, well, look, the full burden of the selection process will fall on you. So therefore, you must outsource to professionals in the field for them to, do the initial screening. So that's where the idea of the firm comes in. But if you had full-time commissioners, they could be much more involved in the process. They could probably sit in on the interviews, that kind of thing. So therefore, we are now able we would now be able to make a greater impact. That's one way for sure. The second thing is that I would think that if it is that we have a continuous assessment process going on all the time. So in other words, among your senior ranks, your executive of the police service, all right, so I think if you're looking at that as your field that you can choose from, we must have a continuous assessment process, a continuous graded process going on all the time. So in other words, you have a ranking system going on all the time, not just an ad hoc scenario where a shortlist is created as a knee-jerk reaction because somebody resigns or somebody demits office. We know that there must be succession planning. So if we have a continuous assessment procedure whereby persons are given, like, say, for instance, how you have like a grade point average at university. So over time, you always know where you stand. So therefore, then you look at it, and on the continuous assessment process, then it's very easy to say, well, okay, the next highest qualified candidate in all these categories, when you tally it and you get the average of all the scores, this is the next highest candidate. So therefore, that once they can then satisfy the interview process, then you are able to make it very simple. I don't know why we have complicated this and made the appointment of the police commissioner more difficult than the appointment of a chief justice, than the appointment of a president, than the appointment of a prime minister. It does not need to be so complicated. A continuous assessment process is going to help resolve many of those issues.
Now, the government is saying that they need a simple majority to pass the changes. Would you, and you also agree, changes are needed, but you are not in full support of the changes put forward by the government. Is that correct?
Well, no, I'm not giving a view one way or the other, Hema, in terms of whether I support it or not. What I'm saying is that we just always have to be mindful of, first of all, preserving the role of the statutory bodies. And I think we can do that while still achieving the stated objective. So it may be that there is need for wider discussion with the relevant stakeholders, which would obviously involve the PSC. And I think we can find a win-win situation out of this rather than the acrimonious politics that it seems set to go down that road in the parliament starting today.
If the government goes ahead with it, with this, with the changes and brings it to parliament and passes it, would it be prudent? Would it be a step in the right direction? And the opposition have also indicated their intention to challenge the legislation in the courts.
Well, the thing is, given that there's already the stated intention to challenge it, and I think there is, some room for persons to at least prepare a case to say, well, look, we are challenging it on these bases, I would think that maybe one should give pause to consider, look, can we have some dialogue about it, even though it's late in the day? You see, sometimes I think our politicians need to just step down a bit from the high horses and, just be normal people and recognize, well, maybe I acted a bit hastily here. I hear you. Let's sit down. Let's meet. Let's have some discussion. Let's invite the relevant stakeholders. Let's see how we can fix this.
Well,
but
I don't know.
They all got entrenched in their positions, and they feel they have to dig in their heels and hold fast.
Well, that seems to be the adversarial the nature of politics in our country, and expecting good sense to prevail. Well, Mr. George, I think you're an eternal optimist there.
I will always be.
Thank you, Martin, for taking our call this morning to share your thoughts.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much on this matter. Well, Akash Samra is standing by for the 6:30 news update. Akash, good morning. How are you? What are we following in news?
Morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Did you sign the late sheet? You remember in school when you reached school late, you had to sign a late sheet by the security guard? Did you sign
What would I do without Akash to ensure that the show is open and starts on time?
Some not so very good news this morning. There's the road fatality last evening. Road fatality number 9. It's not a Trinidadian citizen. It's a citizen of the U.S. Identified as Cecil White. He and his wife were passengers in a vehicle which was turning onto the Trinity Central Road, facing in a westerly direction.